So I'm going to take a little bit of time today and walk through the processing on some data I captured over the last few clear evenings we've had. This is on the Iris Nebula, NGC 7023. I'll be using Astro Pixel processor version 1.078 and finishing it off in Photoshop. So you can see when you load up Astro Pixel processor, you've got your standard intro screen here. I will go to the directory that I typically use for my processing, which is on my main hard drive that has Windows on it. Inside of Astro Pixel processor, there's a lot of stuff that you can do. I have fallen into a pretty easy way of going about things, at least on my stuff. I've processed a lot of photos, not necessarily all of them being good, but I have processed a bunch of them. So what I usually do is, since I'm running a ZWO 183 single shot color camera, it's the 183 MC Pro, I do force the Bayer to support the matrix on that camera. If I'm using an L-Enhance Pro filter or another duo or triple narrowband filter made for one-shot color cameras, I will select the HA oil color, or if I'm trying to extract the HA or the oxygen, I just select those. But for the most part, I leave it on adaptive area disk for the algorithm because it does work really well. So after I select my Bayer matrix, I will go over to the load screen. I don't typically do the multi-channel, multi-session processing. In the most recent update, this has been ticked automatically, and it took me a little bit to remember to uncheck it whenever I do go to start processing photos. So usually I'll load my lights last, just because it's in a different directory than Astro Pixel processor, my working directory is. So I've already got flats and darks and dark flats created. So and I'm not very good about making new calibration frames. So these are pretty old. I don't even know. Made, I guess, just almost 2 months ago. My dark frames that I do use, those were made quite a while ago, though. That was back in September. And that's the one I currently use still. And it seems to be working okay. Doesn't mean I could use new ones. I probably could, but that's what it is. So I'm looking for the master dark file. So I shoot at 175 gain, 30 offset, typically 3-minute exposures on almost everything, just to try and keep my calibration easy. So I'll select it, my master dark flat frame. Turn in the 0.4. I don't use a bias. I do use the bad pixel map, and that was probably created last year sometime. So those are all the calibration frames, the masters that I have now. I'll bring in the light frames now, and those are located on an external hard drive. They're listed under Sharp Captures, but I actually use Sequence Generator Pro for it. That's just the folder that I started putting all of these into as I was bringing them together. So I'm going to Control A, select all of them, and open them. So 240. I actually had more than that, closer to 300, but I've already been through them and deleted out the ones that didn't look like they were going to do very good. So now when I load these up, I've got that green tint. I do use a Bader moon and sky glow filter to help a little bit with the light pollution, but also has the UV and IR cut on it. So for the one-shot color, I kind of need that. So but I'll click neutralize background, and it will run through and even that out. So you can see we've got the Iris Nebula right there. So most of these should be pretty similar to each other. Maybe offset this a little bit because of the dithering, but they should all, that one's rotate it just a little bit. So these are, you know, multiple night sessions that I'm going to try and stack together, and it should do fine. I had very little issue with Astro Pixel processor not taking everything, and I mean, it does a good job. No matter what I toss at it, it seems to do everything like it should. So, and with this new release of Astro Pixel processor, I actually don't mess with really any of this unless I'm going to do a mosaic, and then that's something else entirely. But so after I've done my Bayer matrix, I've loaded my frames, I just go straight to integrate, and I decide out of all of these how many I want to keep. I was thinking 85%, so should stack 204. It'll take the best of those 240 and stack 204 of those together. So these are 3-minute frames, so this is, you know, 600 minutes of exposure, 10 hours give or take on the Iris Nebula. So you know, the rest of the stuff I don't. It's done automatically. So this is a new feature that was put in with one of the later releases. You know, automatic is going to choose, you know, all of these options for you. It should make it pretty good. Before you had to pick average, medium, and come down through the local normalization. You know, select your rejection and all of that. But this is all automatic now. So and that's pretty much it for the setup. You just hit integrate and wait. Now, depending on your computer, could take a little while. I've got 24 gigs of RAM allowed for APP to use, and it's using 15 of my 16 cores. I do have a fairly decent computer, and with these later releases of APP, they've really cut down the amount of time it takes to register the files, which was a big portion of the time in doing this. So we'll hit this button, and I'll come back whenever it's done. Oh, and be sure to put in your title. This is also new with one of these later releases. So instead of just having an arbitrary number, you know, stacking time and the type of file it is, you can put in the title here, or the target you're shooting at, and it will go ahead and you know, apply that to all of those the frames that it ends up stacking, so, or all of the files it creates from the stack. Alright, so after about an hour later, we have a stacked image. Does not look too fantastic. Got some gradients. Probably those flats that I need to redo could play a part in this. But we'll see if we can try to clean it up a little bit. So in Astro Pixel processor, we're going to try a bit of light pollution removal and see if that helps. Select the outsides where there's some gradient and hope it clears some of that up. I usually try to stay away from the target when I do that. Also, like any of the dust that's in there. So it helped a little bit, not as much as I would have liked. I'll throw in a couple more. And we might try to get the other gradient removal tool in here. Okay, so that cleaned it up pretty good, actually. So I'm going to save that. So it's got the same title to it that you gave to the target, light pollution, calibrated background. So each of those acronyms has a different meaning to it. So now we've got another processed image, which is the light pollution removed one. So I'll open it up. So I'm always editing the most recent image. So, and you can calibrate star colors, and that's for the most part with a one-shot color image, reflection nebula, galaxy, moon, whatever. That's pretty much all I do in Astro Pixel Processor. You've got some other options over here that you can use. You can increase contrast, the sharpness. You can, put the saturation in, and it'll go ahead and bring out, some of these colors. You can adjust the strength of the stretch. I usually do 15%, 2.5 base, and then sometimes I'll try the 20 to see what that does, but a lot of times it makes it too bright, and I can do a lot of this in Photoshop too, which I'm a little bit more comfortable and familiar working with. So usually leave it at 15. Now, one thing I did want to point out is, so we've got all of these light frames. They've all been calibrated and registered. And you can see there's some information here. You've got your gain, exposure settings. So your quality score, the higher the score, the better the image is. And this is based mostly off of, as far as I can tell, based, or at least a good portion off of our focus. So the FWHM, or full width half maximum, of the image is basically our focus. So it's looking at the stars and measuring, how far off they're from a certain point. So the lower the number here, the better focus you have. The higher the number here, the better the image is. So, and you can see which ones were integrated and which ones weren't, based on the integrate feature here. So it's taken that 85% of the images that I've loaded in, and it's kicked some of them out and kept others. So and if you roll through here, you can see which one they're referencing for the whole stack. Right here. So the REF, the reference image, has the highest quality score, and in turn the lowest focus number, full width half maximum, and it'll give you, that's going to be the best image right there. So if we were actually to pull this one up on its own and look at it, this would be what is considered the best, tightest image that we had, that they're using for a reference. So, so you can see the difference between a single image and our stack pretty easily. And this is, without any editing so far. So we'll do a part 2 video to this to show you how I take this image into Photoshop and what I do with it there. So before I go though, we're going to save it. And in order to open it up in Photoshop and use it, we need to save this as a TIFF file. Whenever you're saving as a TIFF file, use 16-bit integer. The floating point I don't think works quite as well. I've always had really good luck with the 16-bit file in Photoshop, so we'll save the TIFF image as a 16-bit file. And make sure the stretch check mark is done here. Otherwise, it's not going to save the stretched image. If that is unchecked, you will save this file here. So this is the unstretched image, the unstretched stack, and this is what you'll take into Photoshop. For my workflow, this does not do very well. So I usually send that stretched image into Photoshop. So anyway, so I'll catch you here in just a little bit with part 2, working in Photoshop to process astrophotography images. Thanks.